In World of Tanks Blitz, there are several types of ammunition, and each of them is significantly different from the others. I'm pretty sure you know almost nothing about the ammunition in the game because each type has its own unique flight mechanics and target penetration. Today, I'll walk you through all the ins and outs of the game regarding different types of ammunition. And finally, we'll figure out which type of ammunition is the best in the game. Let's dive in. The first thing you should know is that on almost all tanks, there are both regular and premium ammunition types. The difference between them is significant. Regular rounds are completely free, while premium rounds cost quite a bit. And the most important thing is that premium rounds have much higher armor penetration than regular rounds. Also, the damage of premium rounds is slightly lower than regular ones. This is done to ensure the game isn't pay to win. However, it's fair to mention that there are tanks where premium rounds hardly make a difference in damage compared to regular rounds. For example, HORI or STB-1. Both of these tanks have premium rounds that are quite powerful, so you can comfortably load your entire ammo rack with premium rounds. Now let's figure out which type of ammunition is the best in the game. Without hesitation, I can say that armor piercing is the best type of ammunition in the game. Among its advantages, we can note that this type of ammunition is the primary one for most tanks, meaning it's free. Additionally, the round doesn't lose much armor penetration over distance, but I'll explain this in more detail shortly. Also, this type of round can easily penetrate various objects on the map, such as walls or enemy tank screens, and the main thing is that this round has good normalization, specifically 5 degrees. This means that in most cases, you'll penetrate an enemy tank even at angles. Remember this parameter. It will be crucial for other types of ammunition. Let's move on. Armor-piercing composite rigid, or simply APCR shell. This type of ammunition is also quite common as the primary shell on tanks. However, it's inferior to the previous type of round. Firstly, there are issues with normalization, only 2 degrees. This means that any slight angle of the enemy tank and you won't be able to penetrate it. But there are also positives. This type of round can still penetrate various objects on the map and tank screens. Additionally, these shells have the highest flight velocity. However, it's important to note that they lose armor penetration significantly over distance. And quite often, these shells can penetrate without causing damage, but that's just my personal observation. Next up is high explosive anti-tank, or simply heat shell. Among its positive aspects, it's worth noting that these shells never ricochet. This means that you can penetrate the enemy even at steep angles. Additionally, this type of shell is capable of maintaining its armor penetration over long distances. However, there is a significant downside. Such shells cannot penetrate through objects on the map, and hitting an obstacle like a screen or a wall can ruin your shot. This type of ammunition is often encountered as premium ammunition and serves as an excellent complement to armor-piercing shells. And finally, we've reached high explosive shells. I believe this is the most interesting type of ammunition for many of you. However, not everyone understands how these shells work. Let me explain. When the shell comes into contact with the armor of an enemy tank, it instantly explodes and the fragments hit the target. You can see this on your screen. So when such a shell hits an area with thick armor, in the game, this armor is marked in yellow. The shell doesn't penetrate inside but explodes on the surface. In this case, you'll deal some damage depending on the thickness of the armor, but if you shoot at the gray area, then the shell penetrates inside and you inflict maximum damage to the enemy tank. It's also worth mentioning that the fragments of such a shell can deal damage even when the shell explodes not on the tank, but for example underneath it or nearby. Thus, you can damage even multiple enemies if they're standing close together. And of course, this type of shell cannot penetrate various obstacles on the map. And when it comes to screens or walls, forget about it. Such a shell is perfect when the enemy is capturing the base, and you need to deal some damage to stop the capture process. Also, in the game, there is an upgraded version of such shells. They are called high explosive squash head, or simply HESH shells. These are exactly the same shells, but they have much higher armor penetration. Usually these are premium shells, but sometimes you can encounter them as regular shells instead of standard HE shells. For example, on the FV215B, just look at how easily it penetrates armor with such HESH shells. Here's how I ranked all the shells from worst to best according to my opinion. The worst type of shell in my view is high explosive. This type of shell is rarely useful in battle. Next are APCR shells. They have a lot of drawbacks, and it's unclear why such shells exist when there are armor-piercing shells available. Next, I placed HESH shells. They deliver very powerful damage to modules, and overall, their damage output is very high. Following that are heat shells. They are perfect for penetrating armored tanks, but be cautious with screens and map objects. And finally, the best shell in the game is armor-piercing shells, the most versatile type of shell. And of course, I couldn't forget about missiles. They're a must-have, but unfortunately, they are only available in fun modes, and not everyone has access to the Sheridan missile. Well, now you know how the shell mechanics work in the game. I hope this video was helpful for you. See you soon. Bye for now.